Welcome back to our second installment of our First Impressions series. Today we begin the Fall of Max Payne. I have been looking forward to continuing on this series and I'm glad to share my first experience with you. As with the first game, these videos will be streamlined, showing the story moments and anything I find interesting enough to discuss within the lore or symbolism. I have modified the format in order to provide a more concise discussion of this game. Keep in mind that I write my thoughts on each chapter immediately after finishing them. This way I can share my thoughts independent of what comes after, and everyone gets to see my opinion and knowledge of the story evolve as we go. So let's get into it. The story begins with Max in an unknown manor with a dark-haired woman I presume is Mona Sax. The police surround the structure, and it appears that this is their last stand. The last time we saw Max was in the back of a police car with the promise that Woden would get the charges dropped. Mona was last seen collapsed in an elevator with a gunshot wound to the head. There apparently has been a time skip of an unknown period. The dialogue suggests a relationship has developed between the two. The setting feels like it is the end of the road for them, accepting their fate. Payne muses on the idea that no matter how hard he tries, his past will always catch up and consume him. The story jumps back to earlier that night with Payne in a hospital and injured so badly the ER nurses did not believe he would make it. I find it interesting that even the flashback begins in the middle of the story. The narrative does not appear to be told in a chronologically linear format, so I'll have to pay extra attention. After ripping the IV from his arm, Payne dresses and heads off. It is obvious he's still pumped full of painkillers from the disorientation and hallucinations he experiences. Dialogue from the previous games haunt him as he moves down the halls. It appears Sam Lake no longer models the character of Max. Likely this is because Remedy had a larger budget and hired an actor. While I doubt it, there may be an in-lore reason for it as well. Previously, it had been suggested by the developers that the reason it is always nighttime during the first game is because after the death of his family, Max perceives the world as an eternal night. This possibly could be a similar thing, but with how Max perceives himself from then to now, almost like a completely different person. In one of the medical rooms, Max begins to have visual hallucinations of a sexual encounter with Mona. It appears that during whatever time gap occurred, they had spent a lot more time together. However, in the intro scenes, the impression I get is he is questioning whether he did love her or is attracted to her for other reasons. Immediately after, Payne comments that he has a gap in his memory. Whether this be due to denial like he suggested, or as a result of whatever physical trauma he sustained is up in the air. The waiting room had several advertisements on the walls. One is for Interfectum painkillers. I could have missed the brand name in the first game, but I laughed at the name choice. Interfectum is Latin meaning to kill or destroy. On the answering machine, a Dr. Magdalena mentions that the woman brought in was dead upon arrival. Her name is based upon Mary Magdalene from the New Testament. The surname means Lady of Magdala. The etymology breaks down to the Hebraic word migdal, which means tower. After an armed man arrives to kill him, Payne suffers another hallucination of a woman named Winterson, one that he apparently knows. This foreshadows that this woman may be involved in something, and the voice of Mona suggests she is there to kill her. In the waiting room, a TV set is on playing an episode of Address Unknown. The announcer mentions that they have a 2-day Return to Sender marathon. This is the title of the 5th book in Alan Wake's Alex Casey series. I will analyze the episodes in full once I finish the game. I am amused that Sam Lake and Marcos Resto returned to model the characters for the doctor and patient. Being my usual OCD self, I hung around the waiting room for 10 minutes watching all the commercials to make sure nothing was missed. Max meets Bravura outside of an elevator before he is shot dead by a masked assailant. Their conversation tells me that they have a more cordial relationship than they did in the first game. Upon reaching the morgue, we find the body of Winterson, and Payne admits he killed her. At this point, we are made to question what exactly led up to the death of this lady. Further flashbacks will be needed to fill in these blanks. We flash forward to the initial scenes of the game, and it is shown that Max still blames himself for his family's death. Staying late to chat with a friend, he wasn't home when the Valkyr junkies were released to execute Michelle. Just as Payne comments, our destination in life is a series of choices, some made by us and some made by others. Looking back, if we attempt to find out how we ended up in the place we are now, it can give you fresh illumination on yourself, or it can drive you mad. It is my opinion that the format of the storytelling reflects Payne trying to come to grips with how he arrived in this manner with a dangerous woman and surrounded by his former allies. Just like our memories, the narrative is constantly shifting between points of time, and it is only by getting every piece of the puzzle can we see the full picture. I feel like the story of this game appears to follow Max Payne's stream of consciousness. As such, the events may be altered to reflect his own recollection of events, the imagery as dark as his own mind. As predicted, the story flashes back and fills us in on the events immediately after the first game concluded. Despite being released free as a bird and having the public consider him a hero, Payne is sickened by his own actions. He desired to be punished, but Woden's involvement caused the laws of man to fall short. Sometimes our own personal code has a higher standard than that of society. The plot of this chapter revolves around Payne taking a dispatch call of shots fired in a warehouse owned by his former ally, Vladimir Lem. The Russian mobster had previously aided Max in taking down the Punchinello crime family. Seeing old faces return is welcome, as I was curious how the relationship developed after the conclusion of the first game. Hearing gunshots as soon as Max arrives to the warehouse, it appears he has not retired from the business. Turning around in the parking lot, I looked over a billboard for a Gold Touch brandy. This appears to be an obvious allusion to King Midas, the man who could turn anything he touched to gold. Shortly after, we come across one of the workers for the squeaky cleaning service. Claiming to have not heard the gunshots outside, he leads us inside. I didn't trust him and initially shot the man before heading through the door. Curious, I loaded a previous save just to see what happens if we left him alive. It appears he would have drawn a gun on us, so my initial instinct was accurate. Shooting our way through the warehouse of hired men, we come across an old neon sign for the Ragnarok Club. I was curious what Vladimir was doing with it, but get moving. Finding another mirror, I noted that we only see them above a sink. As I paused to look at Max's reflection, I wondered about the parallels to the evil doppelganger within Address Unknown, John Mira. What dark reflection does Payne see staring at him in this mirror? The demon he believes himself to be, the one he wants to have punished. These mirrors appear only over a sink, and it reminds me of a stoop containing holy water. Seeing the darkness of himself and given the option to wash his sins away. Of course, he never does, because he wants to be punished and not get away scot-free. This theme is further hammered home by the squeaky cleaning company, washing away the blood and sin committed in the building. It begs the question, is it better to learn to live with one's demons, or to pretend they do not exist? Payne arrives in time to witness a weapons dealer and gunsmith, Annie Finn, executed. This is another event that serves to get him personally invested in the case, especially because she was an associate of Vladimir. After he attempts to exit the building, he briefly bumps into Mona Sax, still alive after her gunshot wound to the head. Shortly after, the backup arrives and we meet Detective Winterson, the woman that Payne allegedly murders the following day. Going along with the theme of winter from the first game, her name appears to be a reference to Fimbulvetter as well. With the neon sign in the building, the Ragnarok illusions have returned. Will there be a new personal apocalypse for Max to go through? Later, back at the detective's office, Payne is handed a case related to Russian organized crime and the fake cleaning company. Winterson is given a homicide, the suspect of which was Mona Sax. Caught between his past self and his current position, Payne said nothing of his relationship with the suspect, or that he had just seen her earlier that night. While it may be nothing, the fact that a call came through to Winterson's phone and it was jokingly announced that it was her boyfriend gives me pause. The possibility this is a Chekhov's gun and this unknown individual will play a role in the story down the line is concerning. Now on the case, Max's first order of business is to speak with the Russian mobster for intel. On the way, it became apparent that Mona serves two roles in Max's life and the story. 1. She is the pure embodiment of the dark past he walked away from after the death of Nicole Horn. Her return is an augury, the cry that announces a coming danger. Secondly, and more importantly, she is an archetypal seductress. Not just in a sexual manner, which Payne has shown interest through his hallucinations, but the seduction of his own darkness. Being a thematic embodiment of his past sins, Mona represents the allure of his shadow archetype. This is the aspects of himself that was unchained and set off like a rabid dog in the first game. Now that he has reclaimed control of himself, he must struggle to keep a leash on the dog. Vladimir has purchased the old Ragnarok club and converted it into a restaurant named Vodka. Based upon the gunshots inside, it sounds as though the ground the place stands on may be cursed. The negative energy that Lupino summoned forth with his ritualistic sacrifices may have left a stain. Inside Vladimir's office, we find a voicemail with him speaking to a woman I presume he is romantically involved with. This feels like another Chekhov's gun situation and makes me think we already know the woman he is speaking of. The only two I can recall in this story is Mona and Winterson. This would be a weird dynamic to explore if this was the case. Payne meets up with Vlad's friend Mike the cowboy, and the two shoot their way to the mobster. Maybe it was just me, but I restarted the checkpoint maybe a dozen times to make sure Mike stayed alive throughout this section. I refuse to let him die here. Later, it is revealed that Vinny Gagniti is leading the charge on the Russians. As far as I know, he is the only member of the Punchinello crime family that was left alive in the previous game. As Max mentions, he isn't smart enough to be running the show on his own. Someone is pulling his strings. Frankly, it is nice to have an older character return, even if Vinny is a very unlikable individual. During their conversation, it is noted that Vlad has a wounded left arm. This looks to be another plot thread that will be revealed later. If anyone is unaware, when I mention a Chekhov's gun, I am referring to a literary device where any detail in the story, no matter how innocuous, may be significant later in the narrative. I fully anticipate the reason for Vladimir's injury to be explained in due time. Later that evening, Payne returns to his apartment and tries to sleep. It came difficult for him, tormented by the devils in his mind. As he dozed off, an episode of Address Unknown was playing on the TV set. As is normal, our surroundings and mental state helped dictate our dream state, so when he arose in his dream, the episode was playing as well. The narrator mentioned a knock on the door just as someone stood outside Payne's apartment and knocked. A photo of Mona was slipped under the door just as it was mentioned on the TV show. It was the same mugshot that was put on Winterson's desk for the assassination case she was handed. After leaving the apartment, a psychedelic dream state with twisting walls greeted the detective. The green color hue in the distance reminds me of the Valkyr dreams Max has experienced before. At the end of the hall, he descends a long staircase that serves as the descent into his own unconscious. Inside was a morgue, appropriate for a man that has death surround him everywhere. There is more knocking, and the corpse of Mona Sax slides out of one of the cold chambers. Behind him, Mona appears alive on the autopsy table before the corpse vanishes. She shushes him and tells him it's a secret as the phone begins to ring. It is Vladimir speaking to a woman who apparently knows Max. This again narrows it down to Mona or Winterson unless there is another character we have yet to meet. Apparently, Max's unconscious mind is already attempting to piece together the clues. Even if he doesn't consciously recognize it yet, this connection is significant. From here, the scene shifts to when Payne was arrested at the end of the previous game. The Gold Touch brandy has been renamed in one of the billboards. As mentioned, this was referenced to Midas originally. Now it is called Sadim brandy. This is the word Midas backwards. It appears reflections and inversions are going to be a reoccurring theme in this story. From the use of mirrors in the Address Unknown episodes as well as finding them throughout the level design, I know to keep an eye out for it in the future. The interesting thing is the line under Sadim brandy. Everyone I touch dies. The context shows that the mirror symbolism isn't just for direct reversal. Everything Midas touched turned to gold, so the inverse should be it becomes worthless. However, it specifies death. Midas did indeed kill anyone he touched as they became pure gold. Both turning to gold and dying are true. This is similar to how both yourself and your reflection in the mirror are true. It simply comes down to what point of view you have, which version of the subject you want to focus on. This makes me wonder if John in Address Unknown has both the tendencies of the hero and the devil within him. We know this is true for Max. In the mirror, one can witness other aspects of themselves. This billboard also informs us that Payne feels like everything he personally touches dies. After Bravura opens fire in the streets, the dream shifts to him being in an interrogation room. Winterson and Bravura accuse him of murdering not only the others, but his own family as well. This makes me guess these projections are aspects of his own psyche accusing himself. We know from the first game that he feels responsible for the death of his wife and daughter. If this is true, then when he picks up the gun and kills the two, is he trying to kill his own guilt? Payne awakens, confused by the lingering remnants of his dream, and hears a knock on the door. Grabbing his gun, he proceeds to open it cautiously. On the other side of the door, Mona is waiting to be let in. She informs Payne that a contract is out on both of their lives. From across the apartment complex, a sniper opens fire, causing the woman to leave hurriedly. Max calls Winterson and requests backup before leaving his apartment after her. He follows the trail of bodies she leaves behind and witnesses her vanish behind the doors at the end of the hall. One of the other tenants found a cleaner attempting to break into her apartment, and we witness her defend her home with a shotgun. Payne then heads through multiple apartments, meeting a few other residents along the way. One even offers him a large quantity of painkillers. Throughout this section, we are reminded that there are more people affected in this conflict than just Payne and cleaners. During any war, regular people have their lives disrupted just as much as those actively involved in it. Within the level design, we have to wait and listen to each of them in order to receive some in-game assistance. Whether this be a gun or the painkillers, the game rewards us for making a connection with them. Further in, we find the room that the sniper was occupying. Calls from Payne's telephone were present. One involved Bravura trying to get Max some help with his insomnia and other issues, even going so far as to invite him to an AA meeting. This just tells us that Max has hit the bottle pretty hard. The second was to Dangerous Liaisons, a phone sex line. He chose to speak to an operator named Mona because he feels she is the only one who can understand what he is going through. He admits that killing Horn did not alleviate his pain or fill the hole left by the death of his family. Even with his vengeance satisfied, his pain would be eternal. While attempting to reach the upper levels, Payne meets a drunk who instructs him to speak to Ed, the janitor, to get a code. Heading down, Ed is humming a Poets of the Fall tune, Late Goodbye. I knew the song was made for this game, but I didn't know the extent it would be in it. Ed also drops the traditional Neighbor of the Beast code, but this time it is 667 instead of 665. The last comments that Payne makes before the end of the chapter is in reference to the fire in his apartment started by the explosion. Again, he makes sure we keep in mind that the shadows of his past sins cannot be wiped away so easily. This has been such a reoccurring theme throughout the story so far, I can only assume he will be dragged back down into it. Whether this be forcibly or willingly, I'm unsure. Most of this chapter revolves around circling our way through the apartment complex in order to get down to the streets. With Winterson having ordered backup, Max just needs to meet up with them. Along the way, however, we are stopped not just by the cleaners, but a few residents of the apartment who lend a hand. First, we come across a former cop who, after losing everything, is now a local drunk in the building. The second is a woman named Violet who comes off like a local prostitute. Both arm themselves and accompany Payne in getting out of the building. This reaffirms my belief that the game is trying to remind us that innocent civilians are affected during conflict as well. Rather than being a single man on a quest for vengeance, Max must not forget about the others. The two old ladies we meet in the last chapter, and these two new characters as well, represent people that do not want to be involved in these gangland scenarios. A desire to preserve normal society is being kept in the back of our minds, even as we shoot our way through the hallways. This theme is front and center in other parts of the story. Now that Max is back with the NYPD, he is torn between two worlds: his life as the lawman and his life involved in the underbelly of society. The fact that Max works to keep the civilians safe tells me he is not ready to dive fully into his dark past just yet. However, Mona, as is my personal belief, is the metaphorical temptation of his dark self wanting to be free. He chases the trail she leaves behind towards his shadow and passes by civilians, reminders of what he may lose if he ever descended once more. With the building burning down, Payne uses the fire escape to descend. I am ashamed to say that I spent way too much time leaping to my death before realizing I was jumping out of the wrong window. Needless to say, I started laughing maniacally at my idiocy. After getting out, Payne returns to the police precinct and finds a note from Mona. Following her ever deeper, Max decides figuring out what is going on with her is more important than the job. I'm concerned he is going to throw everything away to succumb to the symbol of seduction, the allure of letting his black dragon back off the leash. The introduction to this level picks up from the phone call that Payne received from Mona. The location of her hideout was within a decommissioned funhouse that was themed after the TV show Address Unknown. With the show being cancelled, the business closed down as well. As the subtitles of the show are Descent into Madness, it gives me an idea about the nature of the show as well as the relationship between John and Mira. Not only that, but by metaphorically going through the funhouse, Max will descend and find Mona in the heart of madness. With each step, I feel Payne moves closer and closer to the old life he led immediately after his family's death. Even though there is no combat in this section, the experience of diving into Address Unknown was fascinating. I look forward to going through the episodes and this segment in full in order to fully identify the purpose of the show. My impression is that Payne's psychological descent here may parallel John's. Max comments on the linear nature here, the path laid out before him as one he has no control over. In his head, there is no scenario where he doesn't make it to the center and to Mona. Without knowing the full story of this game yet, it is hard to say whether the descent into his old persona is the right or wrong decision. However, just like John, the further he goes, the closer he becomes to awakening the Mira side of his personality, the one that went on a murder spree 2 years prior. Upon reaching the center, he finds Mona singing Late Goodbye in the shower. The song makes its second appearance. Her behavior and choice of words have sexual undertones here. Once again, I feel that she is the symbol of his personal desire to be let off the leash. The moment that Payne finally gives in to her seduction, he will truly have fallen back into his old ways. Before setting off, Payne learns that the inner circle dates back centuries and has tentacles piercing into all levels of government and business. Today, they are actively putting hits on anyone aware of their existence. Mona claims to have a contact on the inside other than Woden. The two set out to meet her contact. Within the building where the inner circle members were said to reside, Mona stays behind at the main desk to guide him while Payne heads up. With a headset for the two to communicate through, her words literally become the whispers in his head. Vans for the cleaners are located outside, so it appears that they have business with Mona's contact as well. Going floor by floor, we clear out the cleaners who had been killing off the residents here along with the members of the inner circle. The ascent here parallels Payne in his own apartment. However, he tried to keep the civilians out of the violence, while other parties have no concern for their lives in the slightest. By the time we make it to the apartment of Mona's contact, we find Corcoran already dead. One photograph shows him with Woden in Senator Gate, proving to Max the connection here. At this point, I'm wondering if there is some form of civil war occurring within the groups. Between the cleaners, the inner circle, Vladimir, and the Italians, it seems figuring out who works for whom will help to better understand what is happening. At this point, Payne starts heading back down to the lobby. Me being me, I got distracted by the piano here and learned that Max has been taking some lessons on the side. As a pianist myself, I approve. Shortly after, we hear through the headset Mona has been attacked, and we continue our descent with urgency. Being out in the open, she was a target for anyone walking in. Before reaching the final elevator, we come face to face with Kaufman finally, the head of the cleaners. With his death, I'm curious if a new enemy type will start in the next part of the story, or if the cleaners will stick around under new management. By the time he reaches the lobby, the NYPD has arrived. Mona has been handcuffed, and Winterson is wondering what Payne was doing there. At this point, there are no good answers. By flirting with the line between his two lives, he has been caught on the other side. My greatest concern is the fallout of this event will only shove him deeper into the pit of his own darkness.